Okay, colleagues, good morning and welcome to our Administration and Finance Committee meeting on February the 6th, 2024. I will now call on Rianne Kassar, Committee Clerk, to conduct the roll call. Rianne.
Regional Chair Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Craig.
Present.
Councillor Deutschman. Councillor Erb. Councillor Foxton.
Present.
Chair Harris.
Present.
Councillor Hunick.
Present.
Councillor James.
Present.
Councillor Liggett. Councillor McCabe. Councillor Nowak. Councillor Salonen. Councillor Shantz.
Present.
Councillor Verbanovich.
Yes.
Councillor Williams. Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Okay, looks like we're mostly here. I would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gathered today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Chinantan peoples. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, with delegations, we will now proceed with delegations listed on today's agenda. Of course, I'd like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. For those who are joining us in person, please proceed to the podium. When you are called upon to speak, please press the button on the base of the microphone to turn it on. If the light is green, the microphone is on. Anyone who registered before the deadline will have 5 minutes, and anyone who registered after the deadline will have 3. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate removal from the meeting. Interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory comments or statements about councillors, staff, and others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations, please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon those opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. With that, I'd like to welcome a big welcome to Tracy and Allen of KW Oktoberfest. Welcome to you both. You've got 5 minutes. I would think when we push go, we'll start.
All right. Well, ik bin Tracy Van Kelsbeek. Danke, dass du mich hier hast. So thank you very much for having me here. With so many changes over the past few years, we really appreciate having the opportunity to speak with you today and provide an update on Kitchener-Waterloo Oktoberfest. You've been such incredible partners and friends to us over the years and provided important support by way of funding. Your municipal staff and BIAs have worked with us to pull off some pretty incredible initiatives, and you yourselves attend events and are ambassadors for the festival, and for that, we couldn't be more grateful. Today, we wanted to provide a bit of an overview about the festival, who we are, what we do, why it matters, and what's next for us. Some of this you already know, and I apologize to the mayors of Waterloo and Kitchener because this is a very similar presentation, but some of it, you might have some ahas. So next slide, please. Since 1969, Oktoberfest has celebrated Waterloo Region's Bavarian roots through food, music, and festivities. We're one of the largest Oktoberfest celebrations in the world and recognized as Canada's greatest Bavarian festival. The estimated economic impact and benefit of Oktoberfest is in tens of millions of dollars each year. Annually, the festival welcomes upwards of 450,000 guests, many local with close to a quarter of them tourists. Much more than the now 4-weekend-long cultural celebration with pretzels, music, beer, and dancing, Oktoberfest is a gathering place that hosts, educates, and entertains visitors from Ontario, Canada, and around the world. Next slide. Between the end of September into October each year, we, along with the Festhallen and community partners that we have, present an array of Bavarian-themed activities, parades, events, and celebrations. At the heart of Oktoberfest, you'll find more than 350 dedicated volunteers and a small staffing team. Each one embodies the festival's spirit of Gemütlichkeit by planning, hosting, and contributing to various initiatives and celebrations, making Oktoberfest wunderbar. Oktoberfest community programming is largely free of charge, with events such as the official keg tapping, Thanksgiving Day Parade, Bavarian Vendor Market, Kidtoberfest, Dogtoberfest, and the Willkommen Platz, to name a few. Festhallen partners host ticketed events and provide authentic experiences through Bavarian entertainment, food, and beverage. Revenue from these initiatives, including sponsorships, grants, private funding, tickets, and merchandise sales, ensure the continuation of festivities for future years. Next slide. Oktoberfest is a time-honored tradition for many and a recognized brand in and of Waterloo region. Over decades, generations of Bavarian and non-Bavarian individuals, family members, friends, and business colleagues have come together annually to celebrate our unique spirit of Gemütlichkeit. We are an economic driver in our community, bringing thousands of tourists to visit the region each year. Annually, we support local employment, creating hundreds of jobs and providing millions in tax revenues. Our community also benefits from these economic impacts through our Oktoberfest Cares initiatives. As an example, the Uncle Hans Food Drive has provided over 1 million meals for local food banks, and many charitable partners use the festival to raise funds, like the hospital foundations and service clubs. Through Oktoberfest, these groups have provided our community with swimming pools, parks, service dogs, and top-notch hospital care. Next slide. Having felt the deep impact of the pandemic, our organization knew it was time to substantially rethink and reimagine the future of the festival. In 2023, our board approved a new strategic plan that focuses on celebrating a mix of new and nostalgia, creating a distinctive, memorable, and wunderbar experience for all through these priorities that are up on the screen. Next slide. As we travel on this new path of reimagining Oktoberfest, we are planning some fantastic initiatives that help ensure the financial sustainability of the festival and its partners. And folks, we're super excited about where we're headed. You will see us growing through our third-party events and partnerships, such as things like Techtoberfest and Pridetoberfest and others like them, adding to the breadth and diversity of the festival. Our programming, including events, food, and merchandising, will become even more inclusive to ensure that we have options for everyone. Importantly, the Oktoberfest of the future will remain true to its Bavarian roots, celebrate our local community, create lasting economic impact, and be welcoming, inclusive, and accessible for locals and visitors alike. Last slide. As we reimagine Oktoberfest, we look to you and others like you, people who are focused on the growth and evolution of our changing community, for support, advice, and guidance. You understand the importance of arts, culture, and placemaking, and what it has on the overall livability of our cities. And you see that Oktoberfest is an important asset and brand contributor to Waterloo Region. Since taking on this role, I've been asked by so many people, how can I help? Well, right now it's essential that folks in our community and beyond get excited, like we are, about the festival, reinvest in it, and get involved. We need more partners, sponsors, volunteers, friends, and doors opened. So we invite you to join us in making Oktoberfest wunderbar for the future. Danke.
Well, thank you for that, and pros for sure. Questions from our colleagues? I don't see any at this time. So thank you so much, and we'll look forward to another successful Oktoberfest next year.
Great, thank you. We really wanted to just be here and to say thank you for the support for over the years. Really appreciate it so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
I would like to now call upon David Marskell and Frank Boutzis from the museum. David and Frank, you've got 5 minutes. Good morning.
Good morning, and Frank should be zooming in. There he is. And congratulations to Tracy and her team. Since she's taken over, we have had several really significant collaborations between our two organizations, which is great. Thank you for allowing me to come in today. We had planned to bring a few other board members, but considering we only have 5 minutes, we thought it would just be best that myself and Frank, who has an appointment in Toronto right after this, he zoom in. We had requested an increase to $452,000 for 2024, which would have been the first increase except for a $63 increase since 2016. And we just wanted to take you through a very short number of slides. We had done some research in December, and we found some research from the Ontario Arts Council. Next slide, please. And the research, I know you've seen these slides, so I won't dwell on them too much, but the research was really significant, not just for the support for the arts and what it means to people and for vibrant communities, but the significant social change that's taken place in what I call COVID hangover. There's a lot of really interesting, rich data that's coming out of this that we all need to respond to, not just cultural groups, but restaurants and also downtown cores and on and on and on. Next slide, please. For those who know me and know our journey, you know what we've accomplished, from the rock carvings of China to Doug Craig's favorite, the Titanic exhibit, to Indigenous immersive experiences, the first in the region, please come and see iPool, to outer space and Martian and lunar samples, original works by famous artists, the emotional Terry Fox Running to the Heart of Canada, premieres, world premieres, Canadian premieres, in this case, James Cameron's Avatar, numerous feature countries sharing the cultures of other worlds, showing the similarities to our community. The Rolling Stones, we had the Canadian exclusive for the Rolling Stones exhibition, Murdoch Mysteries, Unwrapping Egypt, Quantum, working with the University of Waterloo, Our Body, the Universe Within, and beginning in June, Giraffes, a heightened experience. So we do the best we can with what we have. We're very proud of what we do, and our programming is also, we think, world-class. The next slide, please, and I will pass it over to Frank.
Thank you, David. Hopefully you can hear me.
Yep.
Yes? Okay. As David articulated, one of the things we've spent some time, certainly at the board, is looking at our own mission, our vision, and how we can have impact in the community. And you can see some of the things here in terms of articulating, so I won't spend time on that. I'd rather get into, looking at how we can continue to provide sustainable community impact. And as David just articulated, we continue to procure cultural content that this community richly deserves, and their support has been formidable. If you look at the attendance it has tripled while we developed our programming to support not only our earned revenue objectives, but to have that impact in the community. And let's be clear, in 2020, we attracted 95,000 visitors to the museum. That figure exceeds the combined attendance of the Regional Museum, KWAG, and Clay and Glass. That is significant support from the community. The community continues to grow, and we need to invest in the programs and exhibitions that not only drive earned revenue, but of course augment our municipal funding, but continues to contribute to the community at large. If we don't invest in the people in our community with rich and diverse cultural content, what is left for them? Leaving our community should not be the answer. Yet again, we were subjected to a business review, which provided conditions that we were required to meet to provide sustainable funding. We met those conditions as an organization a year earlier than targeted, and now we find ourselves on the cusp of what is quite dramatic funding cut with 4 months left in our fiscal year. This certainly feels like it's a gut punch so late in the process, and not, in our view, does that constitute sustainable funding. The decision may result, what was proposed, of a reduction of $250,000 in our regional funding versus the reported 10% across the board reduction. The introduction of the 3 new KCIs into the funding formula have contributed to a 66% reduction. That's just the math, and perhaps that's an unintended consequence. But as a board, we spent time trying to understand, and with management, to try and understand why this consequential decision was made. The economic return that the museum brings to the community and its residents is well documented. So again, we ask ourselves why. Is it based on attendance? Well, you just heard what we can do with attendance. Is it based on a better community engagement? Is it built on resident density? What, in fact, are the other KCIs doing that would exceed our performance that would warrant a marginalized funding base to the museum?
Frank, I'm going to have to end it there. I know we've got a question. Councillor Hunick.
Thank you for your delegation. I have been to many of your world-class exhibits, and I hope to go to many more. I want to see the museum continue to thrive. I'm just wondering, since the KCI funding stream was only created in 2016 or 2017, what were the funding sources prior to that, and what happened to those?
I can start that, Frank, if you like, and
Sure.
Obviously you can join in. Going into 2016, prior to 2016, we were a very young organization. We've only been around 20 years as of this past year. And we grew very, very quickly. So our funding was not sustainable at the time, and we were growing our revenues to try to catch up and bring and invest in world-class exhibits so that we could maintain that growth and bring extraordinary programming to the community. We had the City of Kitchener, City of Waterloo at the time, City of Cambridge support. And at the region, it was about $45,000 was the original amount that we were receiving. So as we grew quickly, we just needed support. And at that time, when the KCI program was begun, we received the $385,000. Frank, I don't know if you want to comment on that.
No, I think you've covered that in terms of what the allocation was. And I mean, the other thing too, in terms of providing that funding is how much of that earned revenue makes up of our total and driving that. Because the municipal funding has been constant. And I think it's fair to say that, I think we've been good stewards of that funding to provide the cultural content that we do.
Councillor Benedict.
Oh, sorry, I have a follow-up. Sorry.
Okay.
So you are maintaining municipal funding then from Kitchener, Cambridge, and Waterloo. Is that correct?
Sorry, I didn't hear the beginning.
So you are still receiving funding from Kitchener, Cambridge, and Waterloo. Is that correct?
Not at Cambridge. That we haven't received from City of Cambridge in several years. The City of Waterloo, we receive something for the life of the council. An amount goes in and lasts for 4 years, the same amount for each year. And the City of Kitchener has given us an increase, sort of cost of living increase each and every year.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Benedict.
Thank you very much, and thank you to both of you for coming in. Just Frank, you had referenced the number, I think the attendance numbers, and referenced them as 2020. Did you mean 2019? Because 2020.
2019, yes.
Yeah, okay. Because 2020, we all.
Yeah.
I think we all want to forget what happened in 2020 if we can.
I think
That's the hangover that David referred to.
Yeah.
the issue is our fiscal is different than yours.
Oh,
so,
okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about a little bit more just about the important role that the museum plays. You touched on it in terms of events and so on, but the collaborations that you have with the business community, with the Walpole Hotel, with the Delta and others, depending on the shows that you're doing, and how all of this is really tied in together in terms of creating a world-class city and region that we all want to be part of.
I'm reminded of it almost on a daily basis. Yesterday, I had a woman into the office who was looking for guidance to change her career path, and she had been managing 2 of the downtown bars, Grand Surf and Grand Trunk, and she commented on how important we were to what I would call from my C&E days, the blow-off of our attendance and people going there before or after for dinner or for a drink. I know in the condo that I live in downtown Kitchener, 271Z, the owner there, he talks about the importance of what happens at the museum and Center in the Square, and he can calendar. It's going to be a busy night if we have a busy night. The Walpole Hotel, many of the businesses downtown, we collaborate with on an ongoing basis in terms of promoting them. When the Rolling Stones exhibition was on, the hotels and the restaurants certainly enjoyed significant revenue increases, and the MAT tax would have for the hotels in the area as well.
David, I mean, obviously the exhibits and events are a critical part of it, but I know that recently there was also a situation that you shared that was a life moment in a family's life and a difficult life moment, but the museum stepped up and helped them celebrate their child who passed away in a very meaningful way, and without sort of breaking any confidentialities, I'm wondering if you can share a little bit about that.
It was an emotional weekend. I'll try to protect myself from getting too emotional. It ended with much older people celebrating a Mel Brown statue later that day when we unveiled that just north of King and Queen. I don't know if that's north, but just where Pop the Gator was. We also had the Tot Parade for kids under 3 for the Halloween parade. But we had a parent come emotionally. Their 12-year-old had passed, and she loved the museum, and they wanted the celebration to be there. So we waived all costs and fees and did what we could to make it happen.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Those are all the questions I have.
Councillor Craig.
Well, Mr. Chair, just if I can make a comment, and I've made this comment to Regional Council before, and you are interpreting the rules of debate correctly by limiting people to 5 minutes, but I think we have to be a bit more expansive at times. And if people go a bit over time, I think it should be the discretion of the chair to allow that. I'd like to hear the presentation that got stopped, and if there's anything else the gentleman would like to say to council.
Thank you for that. And I was just going to sort of wrap it up, but where I left off was, as a board, when we're asking ourselves these questions, trying to reconcile the questions that I referred to in terms of the reduction. And we appreciate, first of all, that there are difficult decisions that you each make as elected officials each and every day. And obviously, we're grateful for the continued support and collaboration that we received in the past. We are truly proud, and David alluded to that, of what this organization contributes to making the community better. And I believe, and we believe as a board, that we have been good stewards of the funding that we do receive. And lastly, I never like to go to these without sort of what's the ask. The ask is that respectfully, we request that you reconsider the proposed allocation to the museum to allow us to continue with our mission, to stimulate connections for the residents of the community. And as Barry just asked around, that emotional weekend that we had, there are so many like events that happen throughout the year that impact the community. And lastly, of course, I did want to thank you for your time this morning, because I do think it's an important dialogue that we have to continue to provide impact and to keep our people in the community. And thank you for that, Councillor Craig.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. I don't see any other questions on the docket. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Our next delegation has a presentation to share with the committee. We'll give the clerk a minute to get that up. I'd like to call upon Rochelle Lavelle and Arson of the Waterloo Region Arts Fund. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address you today. I stand before you as your deeply disappointed chair of the Region of Waterloo Arts Fund to advocate against the defunding of arts and culture in our region. I want to share my alarm and deep concern over your approved language that our arts and culture sector is placing undue pressure on the tax levy. I want to express my deep concern regarding the failures of the Region of Waterloo Administration and Finance Department have directly contributed to the active delaying of the implementation of equity work within this fund, and share my concern regarding the failure of our appointed councillors to delegate about the value of our equity work to you at the request of our board in light of your new strategic plan. Arts and culture play a vital role in our community. They foster creativity, innovation, and provide a platform for expression and dialogue. They give a voice to marginalized and inspire us to think critically and empathetically. Your approved defunding not only undermines our equity work, but also hinders our overall growth and prosperity. Arts and culture are the lifeblood of our community. The arts foster social cohesion and inclusivity that could contribute meaningfully to a region known as a hate crime capital. Your defunding is not only detrimental to our community's well-being, but also hinders our art fund's progress and growth. I must express my disappointment in the administrative failures of the clerks appointed to the fund since Terry Plummer's retirement, which we were not informed about by the region.
Mr. Chair, on a point of order, I'm not sure it's fair to be critical of staff in this setting, and I would ask that that the delegation refrain from that.
Yeah, we'll remind the delegation of the comments I made earlier about delegations with regards to comments about staff. So I'll encourage you to finish your time, respecting the wishes of the committee, and we'll go from there. Okay, thank you.
The lack of transparency, accountability, and proper oversight has led to what we can only describe through a DEI lens as administrative violence and has resulted in delaying our process to deliver on the promised benefits to our community or to access external funding. Furthermore, I must again highlight the active delaying of the implementation of equity work to this fund. The 2024 strategic plan speaks to equitable services, yet we have seen little to no progress in this area. It is disheartening to witness the disregard for the principles of fairness and inclusivity that should be at the core of our regional policies. We as directors and stakeholders of this fund demand accountability from our elected representatives. The council has a responsibility to ensure that public funds are allocated in a transparent and responsible manner. We expect the highest level of professionalism and integrity from our regional councillors and administrators, especially when it comes to matters as important as arts and culture. We deserve to at least be consulted in full transparency with the region about matters that pertain directly to us. I urge the Administration and Finance Committee to reconsider any plans to defund the Region of Waterloo Arts Fund. I would like to bring your attention to the costly administrative failures that have occurred within the region and the deliberate delaying in implementing equity work within this fund since my onboarding as chair, despite the public virtue signaling of your strategic plan. Instead, let us work together to strengthen the support and infrastructure for our local artists and cultural organizations. Let us prioritize accountability and transparency in the management of the Region of Waterloo arts and culture portfolio. And let us not delay any longer in implementing the necessary equity work to ensure that all individuals and communities have equal access to the benefits of arts and culture. Your ongoing delays undermine the principles of fairness and inclusivity that should be at the core of our work. As the chair of the Region of Waterloo Arts Fund, I am committed to rectifying the situation and ensuring that equity is at the forefront of our operations. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor James.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Harris. Thanks for coming in, Rochelle. Can you speak to, you mentioned that there's a delay in equity work. Can you speak to some of that? What was either recommended or where that delay is? Thank you.
I was onboarded as chair on July 1st, 2023, under the recommendation of Jen Chan from the Department of Imaginary Affairs Equity Audit over the past 2 years. One of the recommendations was to provide more representation, diverse cultural representation to the board. And in light of this, there was an overhaul of the board that brought a majority of equity-seeking directors from the community, primarily people who are artistic leaders who have the experience and expertise in this realm. Our mandate was to implement all of the equity recommendations from our report, as well as to move forward with further consultation. Unfortunately, this process has been delayed due to administrative failures and also councillors delegating directly against our implementation and the money we wish to spend from our operating budget in order to see this consultation completed. As a result, we were forced to pause the fall round since we were not able to roll out our programs. And then in light of this budget reduction, where we had no really administrative support, we haven't been able to implement our programs. It wasn't until I went and started speaking to the news that I was able to catch the attention of the administrators from council, and therefore I have been subsequently provided with access to the email, our incorporation documents, and our bylaws, which I've been waiting for since July.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I don't see any other questions at this time, so thank you. Council, we will start our regular agenda, strategic priority, equitable services and opportunities, report 611, community capacity building fund overview. I'll call on Mr. Craig Dyer, Commissioner of Corporate Services and CFO, to speak to the report.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to the chair. We have for committee's consideration a brief report with respect to the Community Capacity Building Fund with a recommendation to approve the terms of reference, which are attached to the report. You'll find those starting on page 18. And just by way of very brief background, you'll recall that through the 2024 plan and budget process that was completed back in December, Council did approve a provision of $1 million with respect to the Community Capacity Building Fund. And this builds on the success of that fund over the past few funding cycles. At this point, Mr. Chair, I'd like to call upon Fazia Bag, our Director of Equity and Inclusion here at the Region, just to provide a brief overview of the proposed terms of reference.
Good morning, Fazia.
Good morning, members of Regional Council. I'm happy to be here today to talk to you about the Community Capacity Building Fund. As was just mentioned, this fund is a $1 million annualized fund that was approved by Council. The full terms of reference was submitted to you as part of the report package. So the Community Capacity Building Fund really aims to improve the economic, social, health, and cultural well-being of and conditions of First Nation, Métis, Inuit, African, Caribbean, Black identifying, and racialized communities by responding to community-identified needs that are reflected in the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan. For this reason, the CCB, which we call it, is specifically for organizations led by and serving these priority communities who are often disproportionately affected by systemic inequality, discrimination, and who have historically been underfunded and under-resourced. In this way, the Community Capacity Building Fund is responding to the expressed needs of community and is specifically designed to provide local initiatives and grassroots organizations with the resources and support they need to grow sustainably and support self-determined communities, which is a key focus area of the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan. The CCB has been distributed along the upstream fund, three-step funding model, which is a community co-created funding model that emphasizes engagement, community engagement, sharing and collaboration, collective learning, and best practices. At the Region, this involves collaborating across multiple departments, including legal, finance, IT, and of course the READY team, to ensure that both community needs and regional standards are met. To date, the CCB has funded 54 organizations and local initiatives in the areas of circles of support, healing and wellness, inclusive communities, youth, arts and culture, and of course, capacity building for the organizations themselves. Organizations are located across the region, including Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, Wilmot, and Woolwich. Preliminary evaluation, led by the community-based researchers, as well as our own interactions, check-ins, meetings, and consultations and conversations with recipients, suggests that this fund has been successful in a short time in bringing positive impact to community. It is providing support to those that is intended to in ways that are most meaningful to those communities, honoring truth and reconciliation, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and empowering equity-deserving communities. In summary, the Community Capacity Building Fund is an innovative and responsive way to meet community needs and demonstrates our shared commitment. It is aligned with the Community Safety Wellbeing Plan and many goals of the new strategic plan, Growing with Care. We'll continue to learn and grow with this funding model and come back with reports and updates. With Council's approval today, the 2024 funding cycle will open as early as March. Thank you. I'll answer any questions.
Questions? Councillor James.
Thank you, through you, Chair Harris. Thank you, Fazia, and the team for putting this together. And I've taken a good look at it, and it addresses pretty much everything that I think it should. I'm happy to see that, this is community driven, and, the investment and who is receiving it comes from community and determined and community led. So I think that's quite instrumental and something that really needs to be celebrated, especially when we speak to the equity and inclusion piece of this. I'm happy to support this, and hope colleagues around the table will support this as well. Thank you, Fazia.
Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I also support the terms of reference, but I just wanted some clarification on page 2 under eligible applicants. It refers to unincorporated. I'm just assuming it's not incorporated. Like you have incorporated and not incorporated. So unincorporated seems like an awkward term. to
Absolutely.
use there, like it was incorporated and became unincorporated for some reason, which usually is not a good thing.
Thank you.
So I would just say something that clarifies that we don't expect them to be incorporated to be eligible for funding here.
I appreciate that, and we learn every day.
Thank you.
Not sure what we do without a lawyer on council here, but yeah. Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Fazia, for this report. I wanted to say that I was pleased to see staff at the launch for Black History Month 2024 at the Concealing Museum. And they had, I think I have one in my purse, but really good little cards for the upstream funding. And I'll ask my normal question. What is the committee doing to do outreach to grassroots groups in Cambridge? Because actually, like the Arts Fund, often Cambridge is underrepresented compared to our population.
Thank you for that question, and through you, the chair. Outreach has been an incredible, important part of this work. And what we do is we work with organizations within the different communities, so Cambridge for sure, and rural absolutely as well, to try and find partners that can co-host events and share information. We're always looking for different venues that are more accessible and that people know about in these areas so that people can come and attend. So we hold collaborative events that are made to generate interest and for people to talk about ideas so that they can submit proposals. What we find in some areas is that it's not that there isn't work that needs to be done, but often people aren't organized in the way that facilitates submissions and proposals. So what we've been doing is trying to find opportunities where we can bring people together and share and discuss priorities for that community and bring proposals together. An example of that would be the collaborative for the Rural Upstream Fund is a reflection of ongoing discussions that we met with many people leading up to that, and we're trying to focus our efforts as well in Cambridge in the same way. We learn each cycle of how to do things better, and we're hopeful that we'll go out again and host events and bring people together to, I think it's the conversations that spark more ideas and collaboration, which then will lead to more proposals and submissions happening in Cambridge as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Salonen.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you, Fazia. Looking forward to this. I just had a few questions about the terms of reference for clarification. One, and this is more so just a comment. In the overview, I thought it was a bit deficit-focused language versus the great opportunity that this funding could offer. I would love to just see more about the opportunity that we're getting money directly to these grassroots organizations versus focusing on continually being underfunded and not having support. That's just a general footnote comment, though. But I was wondering, I had the unincorporated question as well. And then political organizations. I was wondering the definition, if the groups are allowed to have, be politically involved, or if it's, you can't have a political party register. I just wanted clarity on what exactly that means in non-eligible groups.
So I think thank you through the chair, it is about political parties. I think that organizations, for example, there are organizations that are faith-based, and that's, they have been funded if they've submitted proposals that reflect the eligibility criteria and the priorities. But I think it's more what you had said.
Okay. Perfect. And then my last one was just on the requirements of successful applicants for the funding agreement. I see that if they get more than $100,000, they'll have to submit either an audit or review engagement. And then I see the next bullet says up to 50% of the cost for the review engagement can be included in the proposals of funding. Would that include if they had to get an audit done? Is that all encompassing in the review engagement, or is it only if it's review engagement and not audit? Because we know audits can be very expensive.
I think we'll turn it over to finance. We have been working with this. I think whether it's an audit or review engagement, we could cover up to 50% of that cost. And so we budget for that depending on the number of proposals. We haven't had any issues with that yet, but I think whether it's an audit or review engagement, we don't want the burden of that reporting to fall on grassroots organizations that are already struggling with the amount of funding that they have, so that we're trying to ease some of that burden, but ensure that there's due fiduciary and financial reporting requirements in place as well.
Absolutely. I would love to just see clarity that that could also include the audit, just so that people don't feel that strain when applying. And that's great. I look forward to supporting it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you, Fazia, and the team for coming forward with this report, and for Councillor James for raising this up budget a couple of months ago. My questions are around youth and how they, and youth groups, and potentially how they could be supported through this. I know we have the Children and Youth Planning Table, but you know, we know also that youth have reported through various metrics that, you know, Connie had shared with us during our strategic planning sessions and things like that, that youth feel that they don't belong, that they feel a disconnect from sort of our general society. So I'm wondering through this, like, is there a youth strategy that, I mean, again, I know that it's up to the grassroots organizations to do this, but I'm wondering how youth and some of the youth needs may be addressed through this, or are we leaving that or keeping that in the domain of the Children and Youth Planning Table?
Thank you for that question, through you, the chair. I think youth is definitely a concern across communities and priority communities and organizations for sure. CYPT does an amazing job responding to those challenges and those needs as well. We also have a refreshed opportunity this year with our Youth Advisory Committee that has come back together. So there's another opportunity there to work with the Youth Advisory Committee to really amplify the opportunities here with them and help them get this opportunity out into the broader youth cohort to think about what could be some possible proposals and submissions that come forth. So we try to play a very facilitative and enabling role in these priorities and really help discussions around things that are most important to communities. The other piece is that there are a lot of organizations, grassroots organizations, that are focused on and concerned about youth, and a lot of proposals do come in around that. And sometimes when we have our collaborative events, we talk about these shared concerns. And often youth come up and people talk about the things that they're doing, the ways in which they can collaborate and put proposals together. So it naturally always comes up.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Fuzzy and team, for working on this. I think it's a fantastic initiative. I really love that it's community initiated, and I'm really impressed with how many areas you can cover through this funding. So I was just wondering if you could, for the public, kind of speak to the many types of initiatives and areas that this fund would cover. It seems like it's really flexible, and that as community needs change, they can be accommodated. So I know you listed a lot of things like youth and arts and culture and religious groups. So I think it would just be really nice to hear some of the things we've covered in the past.
Absolutely. So the types of things that we've covered in the past, if you think about, we group them for ease. So for the themes, we have arts and culture. So those included things like cultural festivals, film screenings, poetry, spoken word, dance, theater productions, and more. In terms of capacity building, this could include staffing or training for staff. Circles of support, we've had examples of culturally appropriate services and programs, including ethnocultural food banks. Under healing and wellness, we've had programming that support spaces for healing and wellness, for example, Crochet Lodge. Inclusive communities is really about creating culturally relevant and appropriate safe spaces and programs that bring community together. And so these are different places where people can gather, that there's resources and supports provided to seniors, to youth, to those that are experiencing marginalization for different reasons, and community groups come together to support these communities in different programs that are relevant. And so there's a list of 54 different initiatives that have been funded that include things like that I've just mentioned. But it's really hard for me to probably honor all of the work. I've been to many of the events, and often at these events, what I see are community members coming together in ways that support their identity, that build strength in who they are and respond to their needs. I see a lot of hope and a lot of appreciation. Often I get, thanked for this funding, and I say, it's not me that's doing any of this work. It's the community that's really coming together and responding to community needs. So it could look like entrepreneurial training for youth, culture food banks, festivities. It could be dance productions, dialogue created through film screenings. I think I've mentioned this. I'm just so excited when you ask me about the different initiatives. But there are a lot of different things that are being funded, and we can send another update with more details around them. But that just gives you an idea of some of them.
Thank you so much.
Councillor Hunick.
Through the chair, thank you, Fazia and team. I'm really proud to live in a region that nurtures and supports diverse leadership. I think this is how Waterloo Region becomes as strong as we can be, and I'm happy to second it, although I'm sure anyone else around the table would. So thank you for today.
We do have a recommended motion that we can pop up. As you can see here, it's on the screen that the Regional Municipality of Waterloo approved the terms and reference for the annual Community Capacity Building Fund as set out in the report. Councillor Hunick, I believe you asked to move that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor James, ask colleagues if there are no further questions to head on over to eScribe and we'll vote.
Chair Harris, eScribe is not being friendly to me today, so I'll have to vote physically.
Chair Redmond is in favor. That appears to have passed. Thank you, colleagues. Item 612, Key Cultural Institutions 2024 funding allocations. I'd like to call on Mr. Craig Dyer, Corporate Services and CFO, and he will speak to the report. Mr. Dyer.
Yes, thank you again to the chair. And so briefly, Council will recall during the 2024 plan and budget process that Council approved a funding envelope of $347,153 for the Key Cultural Institutions program. This was one of several grant streams for which funding envelopes were approved through the budget and for which at various times over the course of the next few months we'll be bringing forward recommendations with respect to the allocation of said funds. So again, $347,153. There's a staff recommendation that you'll see in the table at the top of page 2 of the report. It's page 22 of your agenda package. You'll see the proposed allocation. It's based on what we would refer to as an equitable allocation across the 4 organizations based on a percentage of their operating budget. And so the recommendation is to approve the allocation as set out in the report. Thank you.
Councillor
Erb. Thank you, Chair Harris. To quote our chair from time to time, I think sometimes our decisions have unintended consequences, and I think the sequence of our decisions on funding the key cultural institutions is one of those times. When we decided to remove the funding for the symphony, which I supported and still support as the right decision given the symphony's status, we did not know that we were going to be receiving a request to add 3 more organizations to the key cultural institutions. So based on that request, we decided to add 3 more organizations. However, with a significant reduction in funding, since $385,000 was removed related to the symphony, so we had a balance of $347,000 for the museum and 3 organizations. So in my opinion, one of the unintended consequences of this event is not adequate funds for organizations, and it had a significant impact on the museum. And consequently, I'm suggesting we add another $400,000 to the fund for a total of $747,000. And I think for all of us, the funding of cultural institutions is a key pillar in creating a vibrant and diverse community. And I think regardless of what we do, some are going to say that we're underfunding. However, others are going to say that that homelessness is underfunded, healthcare is underfunded, transit, childcare, and the list goes on. So I think with the resources that we have, we try to find a way to make the funding equitable. And so consequently, I'd like to move the following motion that I think staff is going to put up on the screen, and that with all due respect, we not deal with the motion that is in our report that was prepared by staff. And so if we could put that motion up on the screen. And what it does is it divides the funding based on the formula that's been used by staff over time, where 4.6 of the operating budget for each of the organization is the allocation they would receive out of the $745,000. And I think there's a chart that goes with that showing what was recommended and what would be the new recommendation in my motion.
Okay, colleagues, we have a new motion brought forward by Councillor Erb that we will need a seconder for to then get on the floor. Councillor James. With that, I'll open up further debate and discussion on this particular motion. Councillor Verbenovic.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Maybe just before I speak to it and also propose an amendment, I just wanted to ask one question of staff. In developing the report, I note that there's been a long history that goes back to 2000 of how funding for these organizations occurs, and it's been a funding arrangement that's been negotiated between the region, area municipal partners, and the institutions, and that's taken place in 2000, 2010, 2015, and most recently in 2019. And so I'm wondering, in staff's recommendations in the report, has that same level of dialogue occurred that's taken place for the last 23 years in terms of determining these allocations? Because it's all been based over the years around, and I'll talk more to it later, but around a number of things, including the previous work of the Creative Enterprise organization, key funding that was increased to $1 per capita at the time, and so on. And so I'm just wondering how that factored into the percentage division that staff are proposing at this time.
Mr. Regier, I think that's over to you.
So I think we're always in conversation with the area municipalities about the funding programs for cultural institutions in the region. In this particular case, I think we did have a conversation with them around the inclusion of additional organizations. We had a public report and discussion around the inclusion of art galleries, for example, in the KCI program, and the discussions that we have are, they're of a collegial nature. We're not locked into a particular arrangement. Every budget determines the funding envelope for our programming, and this particular allocation is a logical outcome of the decisions that we've made up to this point.
So maybe let me be a little more clear, Mr. Regier. Since 2000, there has been a collaborative agreement amongst all the partners around this. Has that same collaborative agreement been reached in terms of the proposals that staff brought forward?
Well, we don't have a formal memorandum of understanding, if that's what you're asking around.
That's not what I'm asking respectfully. I'm asking is we've managed to have for 23 years a collaborative agreement that involved the region, area municipalities, and the key organizations. And so my very clear question, it's a yes or no answer, is has that same collaborative agreement been reached in this instance? Yes or no?
Well, I don't think, I think that we've got we made a different decision this year by including the art galleries. This was a very public process, and council decided to move in a slightly different direction, broadening the list of eligible organizations that were eligible for the KCI program. We continue to collaborate with the area municipalities on this, and we do schedule a regular review of the KCI program eligibility criteria, and I think that's something that's I know that the area municipalities and our staff have talked about doing this year. So you know, that I expect that this relationship will continue into the future.
Okay. I'll let that response sit for itself. Mr. Chair, I first of all want to thank Councillor Erb for bringing this motion forward, because I do think that, you know, as we look at the kind of region we want to build, as we speak to the kind of work that we want to do as a region, as area municipalities, in terms of attracting new businesses and new talent to our community, it's absolutely critical that we're investing in arts and culture. I can tell you that the thing I regularly hear from employers is we need to be a cool place for people to live and a cool place for people to invest. We got a lot of great qualities, but we got some work to do on this front. Let's be honest with ourselves, and we need to invest more in this area. And while I certainly applaud adding additional key institutions into it and support that part of the motion, I also believe we can't improve sustainability of others by taking away sustainability of existing key institutions. And so I am going to propose an amendment that I have shared with the clerk and with council, and that for 2024, the funding for the museum be set at its previous level of $385,725, that the additional amount between Councillor Erb's motion and that amount of $93,450 also be funded through the Tax Stabilization Fund. And further, that staff, and it sounds like from Mr. Regier's response that there's already talk about having that conversation, that staff be directed to review the KCI program and funding model with the area municipal working group and provide an update to council in Q2 2024, so there's clarity in advance of 2025 funding requests. And if I may, Mr. Chair, just briefly, and I did share with council the history that goes back to 2000 when regional council decided to increase funding for the symphony, and in return the area municipalities provided operating support for the galleries. Then in 2010 there was considerable work done by the Creative Enterprise Task Force that really focused around arts and culture funding at $1 per capita, and there was additional monies that were put in. That then continued on with the Birdsall report in 2015. that looked at a number of organizations, including the Grand Phil, the Canadian Clay and Gas, KW Art Gallery, the Symphony, and the Museum. And then in 2015, there was a collaborative funding framework that was put in place. And that has really, I think, guided the funding arrangements up until this year and the report that's here. And I think collaborative is the key word that I want to reference here. And I'm hopeful that collectively we can continue in that collaborative approach. And then finally, there was a strategic review of the museum in 2019. And as was noted, they did meet their commitments in this regard 1 year earlier in terms of the funding. And so I do think that it is important that we continue to grow our investments in these key areas, that we certainly look at the funding that's proposed and support that in terms of the Art Gallery, the Canadian Clay and Glass, and Drayton, would request that the museum continue to be funded for 2024 in its current level while these broader conversations take place. Thank you.
Okay, so we have an amendment brought forward by Councillor Verbenovic as posted on everyone's screen. We'll need a seconder for that, Councillor Foxton. Folks, we do have a pretty robust speakers list with regards to Councillor Erb's original motion, but I'm just going to stick with it, knowing that we're all going to likely be talking about similar issues. So would encourage you to probably to focus your comments to now the new amendment. However, I guess chair's discretion for some discretion. So over to you, Mr. Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the arts within our communities, it's always been an important aspect of who we are and what it reflects in terms of the kind of community we are. I think what we ought to be looking at in the future is building these different institutions that come to us hat in hand every year, building them into the budget. So they are in fact part of the regional budget, and they would get an increase each year, and they would get an increase according to inflation. And if they wanted more money, they would come to speak only to that. So we've left this out there that's like a minefield right now. I think both the motions have great intentions in terms of where it wants to go. And I think someone's going to get left out here. That's my concern. My concern with the amendment is it shows no equity in terms of how we deal with the other three groups within that particular funding envelope. That's one of my concerns. The other thing is I have to be an advocate for Drayton Theatre, because Drayton Theatre is in fact an equal partner in terms of impact in the regional community along with the museum as an aspect. And I think that has to be put out there. I've also been in touch with Drayton with regards to the formula that dealing with the average operating budget, and they don't agree with it. That in fact that their statistics in terms of their operating budget in fact reflects the actuality of what happened in their years. So I've asked staff to look at it. I haven't heard back, and I'm expecting to hear something as we move along. Certainly to cut the knees off of the museum, it doesn't bode well for any of us in terms of what's happening. And I'm concerned today that we make all the wrong decisions. And I think this has to be re-looked at, this whole envelope of the four operating entities that want to get money from the region of Waterloo. And I think it has to be reflected on by staff again to come back and come up with an equitable model, but also understands the predicament that the museum has been put in. So I'm sitting here. I'm not going to make any further motions, but I think Councillor Verbenovic and Councillor I usually say Herb, I shouldn't say that, have really taken us forward in terms of raising our consciousness as to what's going on here and how we need to be a bit more expansive. There's always monies for whatever we want. We just have to look at different places to find it. That's a political reality. Let's not kid ourselves. I think we can find the monies to satisfy everybody in this particular envelope. So I'll sit back and wait till I hear from my colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Craig. I know staff want to comment just on the last aspect of Councillor Rabenovic's motion with regards to the timing. Perhaps, Mr. Vergeer, you'd want to do that now?
Yeah, sure. I haven't had a chance to talk with colleagues in the other municipalities. We certainly are planning to do the review in any case, as Councillor Verbanovic was mentioning. I think it would be prudent for us to bring this report or commit to bringing the report back in August, as I think it might take most of Q1 and Q2 to finish the work. Right now, we're in the process of recruiting the leader at the region of Waterloo that would be participating in that work. So,
okay, Councillor Williams. Oh, I'm sorry. I totally missed Councillor Hunick.
Thank you.
Usually it's Councillor Sallin or McCabe I do that to. So, Councillor Hunick.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Those of you who know me know that I spend the majority of my social life in the key cultural institutions of Waterloo region. I love them all and I support them personally, and I encourage each and every one of us to do that. I want them all to thrive. And so, with that said, I just don't understand the rationale behind giving the museum all of the funding that they're asking for relative to giving the other key cultural institutions less. I'm not sure if Councillor Verbanovic wants to speak to that, but I will be supporting the motion put forward by Councillor Erb in the interest of equity and proportionality. If we could cover all of the budget of all the key cultural institutions, I'm sure we would. Yes.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, and thanks for the question, Councillor Hunick. I think the point that I'm making by the motion and why it's 2024 specific is that we're already 2 months into 2024, and to be proposing what really amounts to a 25% cut to an organization already 1/6 into the year, quite frankly, can be devastating for an organization. We've already seen what the impact of significant cuts and challenges can be with what's happened to the symphony, and certainly I don't want to see that happen to any other organization in our community. And so the 93,000 is simply maintaining the funding that had been in place for the last number of years. I know there was a request to increase it. I'm not entertaining that. I'm simply suggesting that for 2024, we keep that existing funding in place. I would also note that with the other 3 new ones, there is no history of them getting funding, so anything this year will be a newfound bonus. I support that. I think that needs to be there. But I think that's a very different set of circumstances when all of a sudden you find yourself getting another $100,000 or $200,000 than all of a sudden facing $100,000 at the last minute being taken out of your anticipated budget.
Thank you.
Councillor Williams.
Thank you, through you, Chair Harris. I just wanted to make a couple comments because I've been thinking about this for a long time. I actually agree with a lot of the points that Councillor Craig has made. I really think we need to be having a bigger conversation about who we fund, what we fund, where we're funding, how we're funding them, not just with the arts funding, but just our external granting funding model in general. I think that we do need to be fair, and when we're doing these funds, it should be deliberate, consistent, and predictable, so that we can accurately account for any impacts of anyone coming forward or any applications that we're getting. And I don't think that it would impact just the region, but also the organizations as well, to have this conversation to make sure that it is consistent, because I think that's somehow where we're getting hung up a lot of the times. And then we tend to sometimes get more people coming halfway through the year. We make decisions a little bit quickly sometimes that I think we could have a bigger and a broader conversation about. So I think that that's the direction that we should be moving towards. But I don't really have an issue with increasing a little bit of funding to all four of them, considering that at the time when I put the motion forward, it was only the museum that was in that category for the year before. So as long as it's fair and equitable, I think that that would potentially be an appropriate thing to do. Thanks.
Councillor Salonen.
Thank you. I agree a lot with Councillor Williams' comments and Councillor Erb. And I'm really struggling with us continuing to make decisions and then change them throughout the year. That's not to say I don't love and appreciate and value the arts, and I do think it is important to, in the words of Mayor Verbanovic, have a cool community to live in. But I am really struggling as well then when budget time rolls around and we're looking for places to cut. We find cuts through things like this, but then it comes back on our desk a month later and we're reversing it. I do really struggle with that. And I also appreciate having been on the other end and been in arts organizations where you need consistent funding, that you need to know that continuity of what you're going to be getting. So I would agree that I think there needs to be a far larger conversation going on, as well as transparency and continued dialogue of if we are looking at changing our funding structures. I also struggle a bit too. I know that Helen has since left us, but she was working on making this not political in terms of we have policy, set out clear guidelines for staff so that they know how to allocate money, and then at budget time we give a pocket of money. And I feel like bringing this back is making it political again, which I don't think is doing justice to anyone and causing a lot of friction. So I really don't know where I sit on either the amendment or this motion. I'm quite struggling, but I think that we need to, at some point, really sit down and review how we do granting, what we grant. I also struggle with not knowing, I recognize, staff, that you took a portion of operating budget, but not knowing what that's going towards for the key cultural institutions. I would like to better understand what it is that we fund, if it's day-to-day jobs or admin, or I would like to know that information. And I think that would be a part of the granting process. But anyways, mine is just candor, so thanks for letting me chat.
Okay, Councillor Liggett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to a bit of a follow-up to that last little bit of Councillor Salonen's comments and to the third bullet point of the amendment. But further, oh, sure, no, not a problem. And further that staff be directed to.
Sorry, you're asking for clarity on item number 3 and that.
And further, that staff be directed to review the KCI program and funding model with the Area Municipal Working Group in 2024 and provide an update to Regional Council in Q2 2024 so that there is clarity in advance of 2025 funding requests. And I also have a question to do with the percentage requested, like how was this divvied up? Percentage of the requested amount or whatever, so you can answer that one after the first one. I'm wondering if when there is a look at the applications, whether there is any deep dive into if there is any monies earned from other positions or companies that are created from within those organizations. For instance, executive directors or CAOs or other officials within the organizations, do they earn monies from any other spin-offs that are created within that? So I ask that because during COVID, we had a couple of organizations had come for extra monies, and I had asked a question of the heads of those two organizations whether they had taken any cut themselves to their own pays in order to sustain their organizations. One, absolutely zero. The other, one partner took no monies. The other had a 50% deduction. So I find that concerning that we're being asked to increase funding for top executives. I just want to make sure that we're not doing this here in order to sustain upper levels of in wages or so when I say that and other positions or companies created, sometimes when there's a deep dive done later on, they find out that there were monies that were able to be paid out through other invoices to come. I'm not saying this is happening here. I'm trying to be proactive to make sure that we don't get caught later with some sort of a, what were we doing? Was our application process stringent enough that it would catch that sort of thing? So I like the fact that we're being asked to review it, but I want to also have that review of the application process. And I'm not trying to choose any one here. This is more of an insurance thing why I'm making that comment.
Chair Redmond.
Thank you, Chair Harris. I guess I'd like to build on a few comments that Councillor Vrbanovich and Erb and Councillor Salomon made, which is that this is very complicated. It's complicated historically. It's complicated for applicants, for staff, for us, and for area municipalities. Since 2014, we have tried to grapple with getting the politics out of funding arm's length institutions and grants, and it's not just the arts, it's other pockets of support as well. For me, this year was a seminal year because we allowed new entrants in. And when you talk to the Clay and Glass Gallery and you talk to KWAG, what you often heard from smaller groups in the arts and other places was there was no room, no oxygen or money left for new entrants. So I think including them, while historically there had been sort of a bit of horse trading or people deciding what lane they were in, there's new entrants that didn't fit into any of those categories. And I think there was a really impassioned plea put forward by those groups, and it's appropriate that they be brought in. I hope that this discussion of this and other topics that we decided on during the budget, everybody recognizes those were very difficult decisions. Those were decisions when we were deciding what do we invest in homelessness, how do we provide social supports, how do we fund childcare. So it wasn't done in isolation, and I would tell you that I think everybody agonized over those decisions. I hope we don't spend the next few months undoing all of those difficult decisions, because quite frankly, that's kind of what we did last year. I saw the movie, I didn't like it last year, and I'm not going to like it this year. And we know that 2025 is again going to be a difficult year. We heard the capacity fund, we heard the upstream fund on Sunday when those of us were able to be at the Ken Sealing Museum to celebrate Black History Month, that those funds are making a huge difference to people in our community, people that didn't find an on-ramp in and now are. And I hope we celebrate that. So there are many, many pockets of funding. I like Councillor Erb's approach to this because quite frankly, during the conversations during the budget, I thought it was made very clear that the KW Symphony money was taken out. And I know that different groups came to me, and there was a lineup to the left of people that wanted that funding, and we had to recognize it was a very tough budget year. So I think having new entrants is a good thing. I understand that I've been head of a not-for-profit for 7 years, and I know that every dollar makes a huge difference, and having the support of government is very important, and I acknowledge all of that. It is very complicated, and since 2014, we've tried to take the politics out, and I really hope we are able to do that in this calendar year. I know Councillor Erb's talked to lots of arts proponents, arts funders, and people in the arts, as I think many of us around this horseshoe have done. My question really is for Craig Dyer, and that's Craig. It seems that the tax stabilization fund, were we to find additional funding, irrespective of which motion goes forward, is where we would look for that money. And I'm guessing, is that piggy bank empty, or can we absorb this? And what is the implication for 2025?
Through the chair, so first of all, we're in the process of working through our year-end 2023 financial statements. So I don't have a firm number yet on the balance in the tax stabilization reserve at the end of the year. If I was speculating, I would suggest it's somewhere in the $12 to $12.5 million range. And at this point, taking into account the commitments that were made through the 2024 budget and including the number from the motion from Councillor Erb, we have commitments right now that are in the range of $10 million. So we have a significant amount of commitment against that reserve. I think in the time that I've been here at the region, this is probably the most stress I've seen this reserve under. And the point here really is that should something happen in 2024 that requires an immediate inflow of funding, the council's capacity to have that kind of flexibility is now limited. And is now limited in terms of, of how we go into the 2025 budget year as well. So I think at a high level, the tax stabilization reserve is under a significant amount of stress right now.
And just, does that have an implication, a carryover for 2025 or not necessarily? It depends on what we do in budget 2025.
Yeah, through the chair, absolutely. Actually, it depends on two things. It depends on what you do in budget 2025. It also depends on what the financial results for 2024 end up being, which, of course, being in the first week of February, we can't really speculate on how this year is going to go. But council's policy currently is that surplus, should it exist at year end, first goes to get the tax stabilization reserve up to its target balance of $15 million. What that looks like is obviously not clear right now.
Councillor James.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Harris. Much of what Chair Redmond had to say, I wanted to ask as well with Craig Dyer about the tax stabilization reserve and the implications going into 2025. Thinking about this process we just went through with budget and the calls from community to, lower our tax levy as much as possible, conscious of the financial situation many of our residents are in. We had to make some tough decisions. And I think the reality is sometimes we make decisions and we don't really recognize the implications that they have on greater community. So I am supportive of Councillor Erb's motion. I'm a proponent of equity, though, and I do believe that, with Councillor Verbanovic's amendment, there is an imbalance there. And I think if we are going to, address a decision that, maybe in hindsight it had implications we weren't greaterly thinking of, we have to look at the equity in all of this and process as well. So I do appreciate, love, and support arts and culture. And I know many have said they want to take the politics out of it, but if you know arts and culture, you know that arts and culture is political. I think lesson learned, but also, as Chair Redmond said, I don't want this to be we're going back and undoing, because there were some very difficult and tough decisions that were made, and I think our intention and the best intention was for the residents of this region. However, this happens, and yeah, okay. I don't want to go on a tangent here because Chair Redmond asked my question, but I do believe too that we really need to think of a process going forward. This can't continue like this. And I'm also conscious of organizations that are getting big lumps of funding, but then also qualifying in other areas of funding, and that in itself is inequitable. So I'll kind of leave it there. Thanks, Chair Erb, for recognizing this, and yeah, I'll stop now.
Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Chair Harris. Number of things. First of all, I support Councillor Erb's motion, and I support the amendment as well. I just want to point out, KW Art Gallery, Canadian Clay and Glass Gallery in Drayton, I believe that's all new funding for those individuals. I don't, did we fund Drayton in the past? I don't believe we did. I could be wrong. But the museum has received funding, and now we're talking about cutting funding from them. So to me, that doesn't seem to be fair. Okay, I'm not going to use any other terms because I don't know if we always use the terms properly sometimes in this context, but it doesn't seem to be fair to me. The only issue I have with respect to Councillor Vanovic's motion is I think Q2 is a little bit too ambitious, a reporting back period of time, and I listen to what Mr. Regier had to say when he suggested August, so I would look to that. You know, we talk about the hard decisions in the budget, but I'm not going to go into a discussion about areas where we didn't make hard decisions. And you all can think about what I'm referring to when we talk about that. I never supported the 10% cut with respect to the arts in the first place. I feel bad for Councillor Williams, who proposed this, and now we're basically reversing all that she put forward. But I'm a supporter of the arts. I support all of this, and I'm happy that if we get it through, but I can't see how it's fair to cut funding to one while we're adding funding to the other three that hadn't received it before. So that just, to me, doesn't seem to be a fair process. So I'll support all of it. I would just ask if Councillor Vanovic would amend his to Q3.
Okay, so we are on a second round of comments from colleagues. So we've somewhat surpassed the time allocation for this particular agenda item. However, you know, we'll continue on. So perhaps in light of that, we can tighten things up and perhaps go to votes if that's what the committee so chooses. So I'll go back to Councillor Vanovic after Councillor Deutschman's request, perhaps of him looking at item 3 in that. Yeah, let's see where we can get going here.
Listen, I'm happy to just say in 2024. I think to be clear, Mr. Chair, I was looking for an update. I wasn't necessarily looking for a resolution, and that was by Q2, and that's really just to keep this at the forefront so that we don't lose sight of it and lose track of it as a council. And you know what? Maybe there'll be some questions then. But I think the point is we don't want to be at budget or in December making decisions where organizations don't have an opportunity to plan going forward. And that's really what I'm, trying to achieve with that. I was just in the queue, and listening to all of the debate. I will again just reiterate and thank you to Councillor Deutschman for reiterating it. There is a difference between, the two situations, because one is being cut back, one is all new money. Recognizing that Drayton did receive money, I think, through the Arts Fund or some other fund on one occasion in the past, but not as part of this. And so I would hope that no matter how we cut it, whether it's Councillor Erb's motion, an amended motion, we are, going back in terms of this issue. And I'm okay with us going back on this. I mean, I agree in principle it's not something we should do, but there was, in my view, a lack of clarity on the piece around the symphony money. And secondly, I do also believe that fundamentally, this is an area that we need to be investing more in, not less collectively, both at the regional and area municipal level.
Okay, I know Councillor Erb, probably wants, he had tabled his original motion, then the amendment came, there was lots of discussion, so I'll give Councillor Erb a chance to come back in, and then I'll head to Councillor McCabe.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm not, so we're speaking on the amendment, or we're just, yeah.
Technically the amendment,
okay.
But.
So I'm not going to support the amendment, and it's not because I don't support the museum. The very reason I brought forward my motion was because I thought the museum was underfunded, and in my motion, I think they're getting $165,000 more than what's in the original staff motion. So it's, my concern is creating equity in the system so that we're treating all of them fair. We're doing sort of the same kind of a thing that we did for the fee for service, where we have some that are recommended by staff based on on the 4.6%. And then we're cherry picking some and taking some out. And so my goal is to treat all of these equitable. And so for that reason, I'm not going to support the amendment, even though I support giving more money to the museum.
Okay, Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think the point that I want to make, I would need to, like, whatever amendment or whatever motion we end up with, I'm going to propose an amendment to it about that we put something in place to say that we look to work with a community organization, like, I'm going to throw one out there, like the Community Foundation, right? Because I think us going around and around the horseshoe in the 2 years that it's my second budget, so the 2 budgets that we've been in, but, you know, having seen kind of this ongoing sort of politicization of the arts and who gets what and who's in and who's not in and how do we treat people fairly, but, you know, parts of it is a bit of a closed club and other parts are trying to be are trying to help grassroots organization. I would like to see that we have a group, someone like and I haven't talked to them, but like the Waterloo Region Community Foundation, where they have expertise in granting that there's like an arts fund established through like the Community Foundation. Money from the region, money from area municipalities, and money from donors goes there, and they have a committee of people who represent the entire community, and they make decisions around which organizations receive funding. I would like to remove this, if possible, from the horseshoe around here, because it feels like we're not going to do the entire arts sector any really service with the way that we're trying to pick and choose who's in and who's out. So I would like us to think about that, if this is the right time to add that to this discussion, but I don't have the amendment right now because I'm waiting to see which motion we might end up with.
Okay. I'm not sure if we're ready to vote on these things, but I will ask Councillor Shantz, I know hasn't had a chance to speak to anything yet, so I'll ask her to chime in.
Thank you. Listening around the horseshoe, most of what I want to say has already been said, but Councillor Salonen talked about as we go through and change things, and Chair Redmond too, as we go through and rethink and change things through the year, it's really difficult to have a consistent approach to anything, because we keep looking at each kind of silo. And so to Councillor McCabe's point, if we are to pull all the funding together, I think it's important that we actually look at where else we are funding the arts, because we're funding the arts in more than just this particular grant. And in the last couple of years, we've taken and we've split it out to different equity-seeking groups, and not just there, but I think we've split it to, I can't remember where they all are. And so when a report comes back, I hope that there will be some kind of an overview of where we are actually funding all the arts, because I believe the arts are very important to our culture and to our community here. And I think that is what I wanted to say. So to Councillor Vrbanovic's motion, when that report comes back, if this gets passed, I hope that it does include an overview of where we are funding the arts in some of the other programs. Thanks.
Okay, I know Councillor Liggett perhaps has a question of staff. I'll entertain that, and then I think we're time to move forward with a vote on the amendment. So, Councillor Liggett.
Yes, so my question that I had asked that didn't get answered, yes, was the percentage of the requested amount. Is that how we came up with it? I see that it's an average of the operating budget, but wages are part of an operating budget, and so that's my concern, that at any point in our history that, you know, there could be some bloated wages there, and I just want to make sure that if we're taking an average of the operating budget, that we are looking at that. So when you say that, how do you differentiate between the two? You know, the percentage of the requested amount, best practices, or the percentage of the average operating budget? How did you come to the 4.65?
Mr. Regier or Mr. Dyer, I'll let you chime in on that.
Yeah, this is simply a matter of taking a look at each of the operating budgets for the organizations and applying a factor which allocates the $347,000 proportionately.
Councillor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I can remember at budget time suggesting to council that you need to tell people what you're doing, because a lot of people didn't realize the implications of the cutbacks, especially in arts and culture, and especially with the museum as an example. The idea that we're going to get rid of politics out of this is ridiculous, because each and every one of us sitting around this table is a politician. And we will always be political in how we deal with things. And if we pass this off to an outside organization, there's politics there too. And we always have to be careful of that. I can remember asking Mr. Dyer about the rate stabilization fund, and if we completely exhausted it, how much difficulty would we be in? And of course he said they would manage, they could figure things out. And I'm not concerned about this in terms of the rate stabilization fund, because there's other areas we can go to. When the key cultural institution became kind of an issue at the time, it was just a museum sitting there with that body of funding, and the other body of funding had been taken out. I was unaware, but maybe other people were aware, that there would be 3 other groups coming in, which complicated everything and left the museum sitting there now having to divide up an apportionment of money that should have respectfully been to them. So I think the whole thing, not that it's been mishandled, but we didn't foresee what was going to happen with the other groups jumping in. Legitimately, I might add, too. So we can afford this, and I think the museum deserves to be supported with regards to the fact that I don't think we handled it properly from the very beginning, and I was concerned about that. So I'll be supporting that motion and the other motion on the floor. And I would like, if in fact we come back with this, I'd like to have an answer to my question regarding Drayton Entertainment, their average operating funds and how it was predicated, okay? By next week. I think that's easy. Thank you.
Councillor James.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Harris. I just want clarification from Commissioner Dyer in terms of some of this funding and historical. So the museum has been part of the key cultural institution funding since 2016. Do you have the quantum amount for how much that is, that has been collectively?
Yep, he just needs a minute.
So through the chair, the total amount of funding for the museum between 2016 and 2023 is about $3.2 million.
Okay, and all of that is specifically from the KCI. Has there been additional funding as well?
So it's a combination of the annual grant, some smaller amounts that were provided through the Region of Waterloo Arts Fund, and the $100,000 for the Rolling Stones exhibit that was mentioned earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Foxon, and then we're going to probably go to a vote on the amendment.
Very briefly, and I know that we talk about these reserves all the time, Mr. Dyer, but if everyone could have a list of the reserves and a definition, or the reserves that reserves aren't slush funds. And we do have to be careful. But I think, like if we have, taxation reserves and what's it for, and rate stabilization reserves and what's it for. And a lot of the other reserves are committed directly to projects. You touch them, you back off a project, such as phase 2 of the ION. So if we could just have a cheat sheet, thank you, someday, maybe, thanks.
Okay. That being said, colleagues, I think we're going to head to a vote on the amendment that's currently before you, proposed by Councillor Verbanovic, seconded by Councillor Foxton. So over to eScribe, please, for a vote on that amendment. Okay, and that motion is carried. We are gonna put the main motion up as amended, just for everyone's viewing. If you'd like me to read that out, I'm happy to do so. Sure. Okay. Give me a second here. Yeah, Mr. Dyer will give an explanation then as to what this entails. So, Mr. Dyer.
Right, thank you to the chair. Yes, so just to provide a bit of clarity, what we've done is we have taken the original motion from Councillor Erb and amended the numbers to reflect the intent of the proposed amendment. Right, so the proposed amendment changes the funding for, so I'll go through the changes. So the 2024 allocation under key cultural institutions is now proposed to be $840,603. The numbers in parts A, B, and C under recommendation 1 are unchanged. The figure for the museum has been increased to reflect the amount of the grant that was provided last year. In recommendation 2, we've updated the figure now, which was originally $400,000 under the Councillor Erb motion. It's now $493,450 from the Tax Stabilization Reserve. In recommendation 3, we've also changed what was the incremental $400,000 under the Councillor Erb motion to now be an incremental $493,450 to be included in the preliminary 2025 base budget. And then the third item from the Councillor Verbanovic motion is now the fourth item in this motion, which is the review of the KCI program and funding model. I hope that all makes sense.
Mr. Chair, point of clarification, we took the Q2 out as was requested. And that change?
Just to clarify, the Q2 is fine. You indicate it's an update, it's not like a final report, so I was...
Okay, so we have a summary here as to what this now main motion entails. As amended recently here. So colleagues, we'll go back over to eScribe and I'll get you to vote yes or no on this. Oh, Councillor McKay, did you have a quick comment?
Yeah, well, I had an amendment to make to it. I'm just wondering, given some of the comments like from a variety of councillors, if we should amend this motion to indicate that we're actually going to talk to the community about the arts community in particular, as I was suggesting, to get their input on the best way to fund the arts regionally. Like whether, I mean regionally in this small r, do we need to set up an external organization, granting organization, that's where we all put our collective money to, and they make these type of decisions. What's that?
Okay. No, I hear you, Councilor McCabe. I don't know if we want to, if you want to work with staff to come up with an item number 5, just as a final bullet, as to what that might entail. It's a separate amendment. It would be amendment to the main, which would be an added bullet point, I guess, right? Of course. Do you want to take 2 minutes and do you want to take 2 minutes? We'll take 2 minutes, or we've got a speakers list here. So how about maybe if you want to work with clerk staff, if that's appropriate, while we go through the rest of the speakers list?
Or how about we, to save some time today, that when staff report back, that they include a recommendation on how to work with the community, the broader arts community, to determine what I would think would be a better way forward in terms of funding, and a more fair way of funding our arts organizations across our region.
Okay, Mr. Regier, could that be something that we add into the update back to council that you've been asked to do here in item 4?
Yeah, I think that would be reasonable, and frankly, I was just thinking through the permutations on this, and I think a bit of time would be valued to figure that out, because I think it is a significant body of work.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McCabe, for that. Councillor Foxon?
Thank you. Actually, that's exactly what Councillor Erb and I were talking about last week, and I was recommending the foundation. But I think that's a discussion that has to come to this council and really discuss them and field it out. So I would prefer that we leave it with staff to come back with a presentation, allowing council to have input in that discussion. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Erb?
I was going to make some comments on that at the end of our voting, so if you give me permission to do that after we voted, I'd like to make some comments on what Councillor McCabe is suggesting.
Okay, Councillor Verbrandevik.
Yeah, certainly I would, it's always good to look at these things, and I would welcome, with the input of the area municipalities, what might come back in the report. I guess the only thing I would note is if we're going to look at this discussion, we need to keep in mind that there is a lot of other dollars that are in the equation. I mean, the city of Kitchener puts $2 million into the Center in the Square every year. We put a couple $100,000, and this is just operating, not capital, into the Conrad Center, plus the registry. So the list goes on, and I'm sure that there's similar things with other area municipalities that are would need to be part of that conversation potentially, if we're going down that path, and that would be part of a debate, I think, at that point in time.
Councillor Salonen.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate what my other colleagues are saying. Mayor McCabe, I do certainly understand where you're coming from, and I agree it's an important topic to discuss. I don't think it's necessarily germane to the report that is key cultural institution funding allocation today, because I think it's a far broader conversation about how we allocate all sorts of funding. So I would love to see staff bring back something instead separate of voting on this motion and not tying it all into this particular funding. Pardon? Yeah, I understand that. I think that report might be separate, but regardless.
Okay, colleagues, we have now the main motion before you as amended that I'd like you to head over to eScribe and we can vote on. And colleagues, that is carried. Thank you very much. Item 7.
Mr. Chair, if I just may.
Oh, sorry. This is the comment that you wanted. This is the comment you wanted to make. Okay.
Sorry. So I just, there's been all sorts of conversation about this around the table today, and just as a heads up to my colleagues, it's my intent to bring something back to council in the near future as to how we distribute money to cultural organizations in the region, not just key cultural organizations. And I think many of us always finding it a challenging conversation when we try to make these decisions in an equitable way. And since budget in December, I've, and some of the folks are in the audience today, I've taken it upon myself to talk to people who we grant to and what organizations they represent to see what they think of our process. And I've talked to some of my colleagues as well around this table, and I think there's a general consensus that we could bring more clarity and do a better job in how we do the granting. And in an ideal world, my preference would be for the region to provide the funding, and then we look at some outside group in the community to allocate the money, and thereby taking the politics out of it. And I know not everybody thinks that's possible, but at least we could maybe try to do a little bit better than we're doing now. And so part of it would maybe to try and reimagine a Waterloo Regional Arts Council being resurrected, or imagine how we grant to the upstream funding where council makes an allocation of budget funding, and then we have people from the community allocating those funds in an equitable way. So I see it as a bit of a nasal gaining exercise for the region and our partner municipalities. And I think the historical information that Councilor Urbanovic shared with us today would be helpful in the conversation. And just given the historical understandings that many of us were not aware of, and the change that's taking place in our community and with new emerging cultural organizations, I think it's timely. So I would just say stay tuned. I've got a few more people that I'd like to talk to and work with staff to see if we can come back with something that would maybe not prolong the conversations quite as long as they have in the past and is more equitable.
We appreciate the warning, Councillor Erb. Item 7, Council Committee Tracking List is before you. Is there any other business? Okay. Oh, the tracking list? Yeah, sure. Councillor McCabe, tracking list. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question was, thanks through you, Chair. Where did the carbon budgeting piece end up? I thought it was supposed to be on this tracking list, but maybe I'm mistaken. Is it on integrated planning and public works, or is it on administration and finance?
So we've just popped that up. Is there a particular one, Councillor McCabe?
Well, I was looking specifically for because there was a discussion a few months ago about adding the carbon budgeting, and I was wondering if it's, and I just don't see it on the on the tracking list, so I don't know if it's under integrated planning, in public works, or if it's should be under administrative finance, or if it's fallen off, mistakenly fallen off. Because the discussion a few months ago was that staff would come back with an update on what that process and what that would look like.
Yeah, we think it may have been over to a different committee, Councillor McCabe, but we're just checking. 2 secs.
Either way, I would just want to make sure that it's on one of the tracking lists and that there's a timeline attached to it. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll make sure that's the case, Councillor McCabe. Thank you. Councillor Craig?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just 2 quick things, and I want to follow up. I did want to say a couple of comments, or one comment regarding the funding model as we go forward and possibly looking at other groups handling it. Councillor Wolf brought up the fact that there is a disparity in the regional community with regards to funding to groups in Cambridge. And every time we bring that up, no one says anything. So I want that to be looked at in the future, and I want it to be part of the dialogue that goes ahead. The other thing, Mr. Chair, and perhaps I can get some direction from the clerk's office, And it comes back to our rules of debate. And again, I come back to the fact that you properly stop the delegation after 5 minutes. But I think we have to have some leeway. Each chair has leeway in allowing a person to continue to a certain degree and then cutting it off. If we have 20 or 30 or 40 delegations, I can see it coming down to, yes, it's got to be exactly 5 minutes. So I'm wondering if the clerk's department here could give me some, is it a notice of motion to bring forward to allow the chairs to have more leeway? How do I handle this?
I will allow the clerk to answer on that particular one. I would say to you that there was additional time provided for that particular delegation
Right.
in addition to the 5 minutes. However,
So you were being judicious, is what you're saying.
Well,
I didn't notice that, but that's good.
usually I'm getting punched in the side of the ribs. Typically, I wasn't on that one, but I like to keep. Everyone knows that there are standing orders here that delegations know that they have 5 minutes and they should build their presentations to reflect that. But I will ask the clerk to make a comment on your question and how we go forward.
Yeah, so the way the procedural bylaw is written right now, it does give the chair that flexibility. However, as you've seen at different committees and different delegations, there is a risk that is run that if you give one delegation more time than another, then there could be complaints to the chair, to the committee. So it's really at the discretion of the chair.
Well,
the rules are there for 5 minutes per delegation, and if you miss the registration, you get 3 minutes, and it's completely up to the chair and their discretion on how they want to enforce those rules.
Well, okay, I appreciate that, and I just hopefully in the future we can reflect on that as we go forward.
Sorry, Chair Redmond was in. She's not able to get into the queue, and then I've got Councillor Deutschman and Councillor Shantz.
Thank you, Chair Harrison. I do apologize. If you guys change your passwords on your systems, it's locked me out of eScribe. I just wanted to respond quickly to Councillor Craig and say, you're very right that geographic distribution is something that's often talked about. And I've always believed, it's been my experience, that governments measure what they change and change what they measure. And it was one of the lenses through which we looked at how we granted the Arts Fund. And that was very much an initiative that was proposed by former Councillor Helen Jowett when she was a member of the Arts Fund. And we did start tracking geographic destination, but always allocating on the merit of the proposal. But those things don't necessarily have to happen at this horseshoe if we make sure that our representatives on committees that provide granting have that as one of the lenses through which they make decisions.
Councillor Deutschman.
Thank you, Chair Harris. A couple of things. First, on the times, it might help for delegations if they were informed that if they come as one organization with multiple people, they have 5 minutes to share versus registering separately. So maybe that's something to reinforce. Second, on the disparity, I can assure my friend that we do hear him when he mentions the issue of disparity, but it reminds me of a conversation I had with someone once who talked about how Preston and Hespeler always felt there was a disparity with respect to Galt, but when my friend would go through the numbers, showed there wasn't, in fact, any disparity at all. And finally, on this tracking list, which was my original point of speaking, was I just wondered, with respect to the location of an Indigenous hub, we don't have an anticipated response date on that tracking sheet. And I don't know if acting CAO Gutka could comment on that. And I assume that the tracking list is that we can keep track of things to a specific time at some point, and just wondered if that could be amended at a future date.
Mr. Regier or Mathieu?
And if Commissioner Regier may have a more specific answer, I was just going to say I'm happy to take it back and to make sure that at the next iteration of this tracking list, we have a fixed date for you.
Councillor Shantz.
Thank you. Just in terms of procedure, I know how we've handled extended presentations is council can always make a motion to extend the presentation if the chair has cut it off, and then it's a council decision.
Or they can ask questions. Councillor Hunick.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know how to handle this exactly, but I just want to put my thoughts into the air. Is that my thoughts around discretion with delegation are directly contradictory to Councillor Craig, because at least this way, if we have to cut delegations off, it's not because we're not in favor of what they're saying or we don't appreciate them, but in the interest of equity, everyone gets 5 minutes. I think is really key. Thank you for listening to me, Chair Harris.
Okay, thank you. Folks, we will have our next meeting on March the 5th, so stay tuned for that. And we will now vote to adjourn. So over to you, Scribe. We will need a mover and a seconder actually on that, Councillor Wolf and Councillor Foxton. Okay, that is carried. Thank you, colleagues. We will adjourn and get set up for the next meeting.